You're listening to the Herald Scotland podcast, read each day for blind and partially sighted people by the volunteers at Q and Review Print Speaking to the Blind. Coming up in today's edition.
Tories may feel in control, but pride comes before a fall. Easing the pain of NHS shortages. The Marianne Taylor column. Peerless farce of the Lords is revealed. Scots Remainers' voices must be heard in UK-wide debate.
News. Revealed. Hidden scandal of chronic pain wait times. News. Culture of denial stalls bid to tackle sectarianism in football. News. French car giant PSA Group to buy Vauxhall in deal for General Motors' European operations. News. Standard Life and Aberdeen Asset Management agree £11 billion merger.
Sport. The Matthew Lindsay column. Matthew Lindsay on Monday. Prospective appointment of Pedro Caixinha, loaded with unnecessary risk for Rangers. Sport. Roundup. First of all, football. Sport. Shinty. Kevin Ferry goes along to see the start of the Shinty season. Sport. Rugby Union. Emphatic victory gives Warriors fresh hope of making playoffs.
Politics. Sturgeon urged to drop economic advisor Jim McCall over attendance at exclusive Tory dinner. Politics. Chancellor Philip Hammond signals cautious approach to spending and budget. Brexit. Chancellor Philip Hammond warns EU that Britain will fight back over deal. Dugdale loyalists lost out in Labour internal elections over bungled campaign approach. Arts news. March into Pitlochry. New lunchtime concert series in Glasgow. Tina May's tribute to Ella. Tony Bennett at 90. Arts. Music review. Ollie Mars at the SSE Hydro, Glasgow. Business. Glasgow law firm hails its latest sports contract. Business. The trend to spring calving brings benefits to cows and farmers.
The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. The David Torrance column. Tories may feel in control, but pride comes before a fall. This Scottish Conservative Party conference, folk kept telling me proudly, was its biggest and busiest in years. It didn't feel that way, although perhaps Glasgow's cavernous Clyde Auditorium made a reasonable turnout seem small. It was certainly the most upbeat I can remember, with the party's old guard and new influx of young activists exuding hitherto unusual levels of confidence. Whether it was the Prime Minister's lengthy articulation of a more muscular unionism, or Ruth Davidson's stated ambition to become First Minister, this was a Conservative and Unionist party emboldened by electoral recovery and opposition to a second independence referendum. But confidence can easily give way to hubris, and at conference I kept encountering arguments and attitudes which struck me as confused or complacent, or both. Take opposition to a second referendum. On the face of it, Ms. Davidson couldn't have been clearer on Saturday afternoon. "Are you listening, Nicholas Sturgeon?" she asked rhetorically. No second referendum. Speaker after speaker, meanwhile, said the party would do everything possible to oppose another divisive ballot. Yet behind the scenes, and in press briefings for the last few weeks, the UK government has more or less conceded that, if asked, it would sanction another Section 30 order, albeit with caveats about timing. Self-evidently, that isn't doing everything possible to prevent another referendum. It would be actively facilitating one. Theresa May's otherwise interesting speech on Friday also indulged in doublespeak. Politics, she said, isn't a game, yet she and her advisers are active participants in an ongoing chess match regarding the future of the Union. Now, of course, Westminster would be within its constitutional rights to say an unequivocal no to another referendum, but all but the most rabid unionist, and there were a few at conference, knows that would be politically disastrous. But again there was some loose talk emanating from the main conference stage. The Scottish Government, several delegates confidently proclaimed, have no mandate for another plebiscite, while apparently no one in Scotland wants it to take place. Well, the SNP's mandate might not be cast iron, as the First Minister claims, but it certainly exists, while polls show a sizable minority do in fact want another referendum. And take the party's approach to the Scottish Labour Party. Kezia Dugdale and comrades were repeatedly mocked, and while one can understand the desire for revenge given the boot used to be on the other foot, by denigrating another unionist party, Conservatives are, by extension, weakening the union they purport to support. Now this sort of tactic might pay short-term electoral dividends, as it's likely to do in May's local government elections, but it will have long-term political and constitutional consequences. It also raises another contradiction. The SNP, we are repeatedly told, are dividing Scotland, but arguably so does this sort of stuff. It certainly won't make it any less polarised. So, as usual, there was the hypocrisy of banging on about the Constitution while criticising your opponents for doing exactly the same thing. But then constitutional chatter is now the necessary lifeblood of Scotland's two largest political parties, both of whom are to varying degrees behaving in a nationalist way. A typically penetrating cartoon by Martin Rowson in Saturday's Guardian literally illustrated the point. Depicting Miss Sturgeon and Ms May glowering at each other on either side of a large mirror, they also shared a caption, "Referendum-obsessed national zealots and foamers." Both, of course, have their preferred unions, and both are neglecting public services as a result. Which reminds me of another point. After last May's Holyrood election, I argued in this column that modern Scottish conservatism had to be about more than simply opposing another referendum, yet judging by Ms Davison's speech, it remains a policy-free zone. All we got on Saturday was an independent advisory board on the NHS and a root and branch review of the Curriculum for Excellence, a policy, it is worth remembering, the Scottish Tories originally supported. It is not really credible to criticise the Scottish Government for prioritising the Constitution above day-to-day governance without offering an alternative policy perspective beyond the advisory panels and reviews. If Miss Davison really wants to become First Minister, it was not altogether clear from her speech what she would actually do beyond opposing independence. When I made this point to a few delegates, it was greeted with uncomprehending looks and implications of negativity. A Law Society of Scotland fringe meeting was also instructive, full of old guard Tories grumbling whenever independent commentators made perfectly valid points similar to those in this column. At points it felt like being at another party's conference, that is, the SNP's. What, meanwhile, of the Union and unionism? In her speech, the Prime Minister called the UK a union of people affections and loyalties, and she was to be applauded for attempting to explain these at greater length than David Cameron ever managed in similar perorations. But, as she spoke, one part of that union was declaring the results of an election which most delegates probably hadn't even realised was happening. By day 2 of the Scottish Tory Conference, Northern Ireland no longer had a unionist majority, and Sinn Féin had come within a whisker of becoming the largest party. What, I found myself wondering, binds Northern Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales together, beyond a balance sheet? That might have been enough for much of the 20th century, but is it any longer? Within a couple of weeks, Article 50 will be triggered. Northern Ireland might be under direct rule or facing fresh elections, and the SNP could be on the cusp of calling for another independence referendum. Scottish Tories might have left their conference feeling in control of events, but hubris, they would do well to remember, means pride before a fall, says David Torrance. The Herald, Monday, March 6. The Herald's opinions. Easing the pain of NHS shortages. Hundreds of thousands of Scots suffer from chronic pain, and there is a system in place that is supposed to help them. Whatever their condition, patients should expect to receive their first treatment within 18 weeks of being referred by a doctor. They should then receive the regular treatment they need when they need it to keep their pain under control. That is what is supposed to happen. However, an investigation by the Herald has revealed the system is failing. The figures show that from July 1 to September 30 last year, only 1,610 out of 10,114 new referrals started treatment within the 18-week limit. That is 15.9%. To make matters worse, patients returning for repeat treatment are not appearing in the official figures and are sometimes having to wait for many months and in some cases over a year without the pain control they need. What this means for the patients themselves is troubling. The mother of two, for example, who suffers chronic pain in her neck, arm and spine and has had to wait over 14 months for treatment that should be delivered 3 times a year. Or the 46-year-old woman who is in a wheelchair and housebound. She also has had to wait 14 months for her treatment. Then there is the case of the mother of 3, who faces up to 9 months in extreme pain because she is not receiving the injections she needs when she needs them. It is this day-to-day suffering and discomfort that is the reality of the delays in treatment. The explanation centres on some long-term systemic issues with the NHS in Scotland, including the waiting times themselves. The health service needs way to measure how it is performing, but waiting times can affect the way staff behave. The figures also do not necessarily reflect what is really happening on the ground, with the waiting times on chronic pain being a perfect example. The official statistics on patients with pain are poor enough, but by not counting patients returning for regular treatment, thousands are being left out of the picture, meaning the real situation is even worse. Figures on how long patients are waiting can provide a snapshot of how the service is working, but if they are to be of any real use, they have to reflect what is truly going on. Honesty is also needed on what is actually causing the delays in treatment. A lack of staff and underfunding. The government will often say the NHS has more doctors and nurses than ever before, but that doesn't count for much if there's still a shortage. The other problem is that demand is increasing, and the NHS is not keeping pace. the government has set up a steering group with the aim of improving paying services, but the cause is always likely to return to the same problem. The services do not have the money they need. As for an official plan, Paul Gray, the chief executive of the Scottish NHS, has said the service will be in better shape by 2020, but that can only be achieved if problems that have been largely hidden from sight, such as the state of services for chronic pain, are exposed to the light. The Scottish Government needs to be honest about the state of the NHS, and then, and only then, can it come up with a clear, detailed and honest plan to fix it. A stricter approach needed on sectarianism in football. Football often takes the lion's share of the blame for sectarianism in Scotland. It is also tempting to assume, because there has been some progress in promoting greater awareness and tolerance, that the football stadium is the last redoubt of religious bigotry. Solve the problem in football, the thinking goes, and Scotland will be well on the way to leaving sectarianism behind. The truth is that sectarianism extends way beyond the national game to Scottish society as a whole, including the suburbs and polite society. Where there is a problem is in how to tackle the remnants of sectarianism that do exist in football. The Independent Advisory Group on Tackling Sectarianism said in its report in 2015 that there was a reluctance to act against sectarianism in the game, and 2 years on, the group appears to believe there has been little change. In fact, the group seems thoroughly exasperated by the lack of progress on the problem of sectarianism. At one point, the Scottish Government claimed it had the answer to the problem with its 2012 law aimed at ending sectarianism in football. But from the start, the legislation was confusing for fans, the police and the courts. The woeful conviction rate has also underlined the fact that the law is not what the game needs. According to the advisory group, what is needed instead is a strict liability rule in football that means when fans misbehave, their club will be held responsible. Indeed, strict liability is the norm in European football and has also been implemented by the FA in England. What makes Scottish football clubs think they should be different? If the football authorities want to avoid strict liability being introduced in Scotland, then there is still time for them to come up with their own plan to demonstrate they are determined to tackle the problem of sectarianism. However, with no sign of any serious alternatives, and the advisory group suggesting that there has been little meaningful progress on tackling sectarianism in the game, it looks increasingly like the time has come for a strict liability rule in Scotland too. The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. The Marianne Taylor column. Peerless farce of the Lords is revealed. As someone in their 40s who doesn't have any pension arrangements, I usually dispel thoughts of growing old to the file in my brain marked "Head in the Sand." Last week, however, I received rare comfort on this issue from the most unlikely of sources, the House of Lords. I have worked out the ideal way to a lucrative retirement, you see. Get yourself appointed as a peer. If Meet the Lords, the BBC's new fly-on-the-wall documentary, the second part of which airs tonight, is anything to go by, that's clearly what many who sit in the place have already done. Indeed, Lord Tyler, who used to be a Lib Dem MP, joked to camera, "It's the best daycare centre for the elderly in London." This is no joke, however. As the programme highlighted, not only does each peer get £300 a day in expenses merely for turning up, they also get heaps of free deference from the staff of ridiculously attired lackeys. "Good morning, my lord," bowed the top-hatted, frock-coated doorman to the doddery old duffers making their way in for the day's business at 2 in the afternoon. "It's morning here until prayers are read, you see," he was sure to explain for those of us who aren't down with daft traditions like these. I can't imagine what the Lord's public relations folk were thinking when they let the programme makers in. Did they honestly believe taxpayers, the mugs who pay for this nonsense, would enjoy having our noses rubbed in this freeloading? Though I admit it was enjoyable inasmuch as I spent a large part of the show laughing at the sheer gall of these jokers. You honestly couldn't make it up. First, there was Lord Palmer, the Scots aristocrat and one of 90 hereditary peers that remain following the cull of 1999, still lording it over legislation that affects the rest of us. As Lord Palmer admitted, in the sort of accent I presumed had died with the Queen Mother, he's never been the sharpest tool in the box. And as he spent much of his time on camera berating the authorities for getting rid of a TV room where he and his cronies used to sit and drink whisky and watch the cricket, you could see what he meant. Stupidity is obviously catching. Elsewhere there was Lord Borwick, the wealthy property developer and Tory hereditary peer, who didn't even have the sense to stop crowing about the fact that as a whip he'd played a key role in relaxing the planning laws. Former Speaker Baroness de Souza, meanwhile, didn't do the place any favours by cheerily telling an anecdote about an unnamed colleague leaving a taxi meter running while he popped in and out within 5 minutes to make sure he got his £300. Lest we forget, there are about 750 of these parasites in this unelected cesspit of pomp, privilege and patronage, 204 of whom represent a Tory government intent on demonising benefit scroungers. That's why I found myself laughing, of course. If I didn't laugh, I'd cry, or head down to Westminster with a box of rotten eggs. Let's be clear. The House of Lords is not only a democratic abomination, it's a societal one too, the most obvious and sickening reminder of what a hideously divided country Britain remains. The irony is, of course, that this programme was shown in the very week that the Lords defeated the government's Brexit bill, highlighting the considerable power still retained by the place. Few seem to give a stuff about this democratic deficit at the heart of Westminster. A further irony is that many of those who voted for Brexit spent much of their time banging on about getting their country back from unelected bodies in Brussels. And with such little appetite for reform, it looks like the Lords will be having the last laugh for many years to come. Sadly, there may be space for me and my Zimmer yet, says Marianne Taylor. The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. The letters page. Scots Remainers' voices must be heard in UK-wide debate. I read with great interest Kevin McKenna's interview with Professor Sir Tom Devine. I initially found your headline somewhat discouraging. The times we are living in are the most challenging I have encountered. The Herald, March 3. However, he goes on to offer hope to those of us who feel powerless in the face of the hard right hijacking of mainstream conservative thinking, and who despair at the unbelievable ineffectiveness of those politicians who cannot find the courage to challenge the zealots in the cabinet. These politicians are terrified at the prospect of being accused of defying the so-called will of the people, and those of us who suggest, at the appropriate time, that will should be retested are accused in standard hard right terms of being enemies of the aforementioned people. However, I for one am going to pin my hopes on Sir Tom's belief that it is inevitable that a powerful political movement will emerge to represent the so far unrepresented in England 49% Remainers, thereby filling the current yawning political vacuum. We majority Remainers in Scotland must recognise that it is not at all in our interest for the will of the Brexiters in England to prevail, and must therefore enter the UK debate and not concentrate solely on the Scottish context. John Millen, 9 Ardgowan Drive, Uddingston. My friend Sir Tom Devine is justly recognised as a very distinguished historian, but I feel that he is on more shaky ground as a prophet discerning the signs of the times. He tells us that his decision whether or not to vote yes again in a future referendum may depend on the performance of the SNP government. While that decision for us all may well be speedily advanced by the appalling policies of our political masters or mistresses in Westminster, surely there are many other sounder and better reasons than the present Scottish Government's record for seeking to control our own political destiny in Scotland. After independence, which now must be when rather than if, the whole political configuration may very well change, with the possible dissolution of the SNP or the rise of different parties. Advancing the cause of independence cannot be subject to a present political party's record in power. Ian White, 14 Carling Nose Point, North Queensferry. I do not share the view of Alan Fitzpatrick, Letters, March 3, that the House of Lords has let down expats such as his daughter. The general consensus of opinion is that both EU citizens living within the UK and UK citizens living within the EU should be able to live where they are currently living post-Brexit. The House of Lords, if its amendment is not reversed, has ensured that such a marker has been clearly put down by the UK in that we are allowing EU citizens living in the UK to remain after Brexit. Allowing people to stay in the UK does not mean these individuals will remain here. The fall in the value of the pound means that it is less attractive for many EU citizens to stay in the UK if they hope to build up sufficient wealth to allow them to return to their country of origin at a later date. Similarly, if the EU were to consider itself morally obliged to follow the UK lead and allow UK citizens to remain, there is no guarantee that all would remain in the EU. Most UK pensioners currently living in an EU country will want the UK to secure a social security agreement with all the other members of the EU, which will ensure that state pensions paid to them will continue to qualify for the annual increase in the pension. Otherwise, there could be a steady flow of expats returning home in order to secure their full entitlement to the state pension. Sandy Gemmell, 40 Warriston Gardens, Edinburgh. Over the years, the Labour Party has taken great delight in telling us that Tom Johnson was not in favour of independence for Scotland, but only a kind of home rule. However, comparatively recently, when thinning down the contents of a file, I came across an article written by Alistair Dunnett, one-time editor of The Scotsman. It read, "It was not until lately that I heard for the first time Tom Johnson declaring his belief that Scotland's future rested upon her obtaining full political independence. A fragment of film in one of the episodes of a TV series about post-war Scotland caught him in a passionate declaration that this was the true and only way forward for his country. Called into the Cabinet in 1941 by Churchill to the office of Secretary of State for Scotland, he was showing us how this could be a powerful instrument of office in the right hands. He swiftly put together what he called a Council of State, consisting of all the living and fit ex-Secretaries of State for Scotland, and got Churchill to agree that if this body came up with a unanimous recommendation, the government would see it through. Dunnett continues, I remember him telling me once, after he returned from a cabinet meeting, where he was thrusting an action upon them, how he had said to Churchill, Prime Minister, if this Disney go through, I'm going to tell the 51st Division, when they come hame, to bring their bloody bayonets with them. Oh, for another such Secretary of State for Scotland. Anne Yule, Bray Tulloch, Dingwall. Time to explode misconceptions regarding feasibility of nuclear attack. Bill Brown's letter, March 2, reveals some of the widely held misconceptions regarding a nuclear exchange. If strategic weapons such as Trident were used in a first strike or retaliatory response, the areas targeted by such weapons would be totally devastated. Blast and fire damage would leave any infrastructure not worth conquering or occupying, and because of nuclear fallout, it would remain uninhabitable for many years, perhaps generations, as radiation would pollute the soil and contaminate everything, including water supplies, if it fell as rain. Neville Shute's 1957 novel, On the Beach, portrays the results of all-out nuclear war as worldwide devastation, and one example in our lifetime, the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, which occurred 30 years ago, has resulted in the land around that nuclear plant remaining uninhabitable to this day. The Trident submarines, should they launch their missiles, will have no base to return to, as Fastlane and Coolport are no doubt prime targets. And since Mr. Brown lives downwind of the blast area, even his house, should it still exist, will not be worth occupying for many years after any such strike. Today's nuclear weapons are far more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and although some of the populations of these cities survived, their descendants are still living with genetic cancer problems caused by the radiation from these blasts. Perhaps if John Hershey's Hiroshima was compulsory reading in schools, we might find future generations convinced that nuclear weapons, especially those of mass destruction, are pointless, and we could take a lead in eliminating the stockpiles which exist in our country and throughout the world. In an emergency planning exercise in which I was participating, one of my counterparts from Argyll was asked what action he would take in the event of a major nuclear strike. After a pause, he said, I'd take my garden chair and best bottle of malt down to the bottom of the garden and watch the wonderful sunset in the sky. I'd be tempted to join him, but don't think I'd reach his garden in time. George Mackenzie, 48 Ardbeg Road, Rothesay, Isle of Bute. I wonder just which of the few countries with nuclear weapons does Bill Brown, letters March 2, think may lodge a nuclear attack on the UK and for what purpose. The United States, France, India and China have large investments here. There are many Jews and Pakistanis, so Israel and Pakistan would have no cause to attack. Russia is resource-rich and has a relatively small and declining population. North Korea has no reason to attack anyone, which would in any case result in its regime being destroyed. There are hundreds of countries without nuclear deterrence or even strong military forces. Some, unlike the UK, are rich in natural resources but have small populations. They have not been attacked and seem not to fear this. Any attack would not be by a state which could be identified, but by a terrorist group whose location would probably not be known. Even if so, lodging a counterattack would cause the death of thousands of innocents. John Munro, 68 Buccleuch Street, Glasgow. Littering in no way preserve of young people. Like Ian Mann, letters February 28, I was born and bred in Glasgow, and I agree with him that the litter problem is now getting out of hand. However, I must take issue with him on his statement that it is the young who are to blame. On several occasions I have seen teachers coming out of a secondary school and dropping crisp packets, sweetie wrappers, and the like on the ground beside a litter bin in full view of the pupils. Many times in Glasgow I have heard a parent tell their children, "Just drop it." If a child sees his or her teacher or mummy or daddy drop litter, then of course they will copy them. Perhaps the parents and teachers should be educated in this regard. Whatever happens, don't blame young people en masse, as many of them are responsible children. Dorothy Priestley, 26 Dinmont Road, Glasgow. Travelling along Stockymuir Road at least once a week, I am disgusted at the amount of litter on both sides of the road to Drimmen. As there are no pavements, I presume the litter must come from cars or lorries. What can be done to stop this vandalism of our beautiful countryside? Phil Key, 16 St Germains, Bearsden. We are living in a very divided country just now, so perhaps we can learn from another country that was also divided, but in its case by a most horrific genocide more than 20 years ago. I refer to Rwanda. Nowadays, on the last Saturday of every month, the people, whether Tutsis or Hutus, every man, woman and child, turn out to keep their streets and public places swept and clear of litter. Could we in Scotland ever have such civic pride? Peter Jensen, T and Aban, Skipness, Argyll. Scottish Power left powerless. A few days ago I received by White Van special delivery a bouquet of exotic seasonal flowers. Heart aflutter, I checked the wee card that came with the bountiful blooms. No, not a late Valentine Day gift from a secret admirer. At almost 80, I can but wish. But, bizarrely, a peace offering from Scottish Power to compensate for the major problems still unresolved with which my husband and I have been battling during the past year. By post the same day came a bill from Scottish Power for £5,875.56 addressed to me. No, we are not benevolently financing everyone's electricity supply in our village, or maintaining a contraband cannabis plant in the spare room en suite. Similar bills come in on a regular basis and are related to an electricity meter. We do not even have, Scottish Power admits its mistake, but seems powerless, no pun intended, to resolve the situation. Ignore the bills. says a member of Scottish Power's Directors Support Team airily on the phone to my husband. They are now on the system, so we can't stop them. We know they are wrong. After months of both my husband and myself writing letters and emails, and endless telephone calls, as well as tearing our hair out in sheer frustration, the medicine bills still keep coming. I will soon be on every credit blacklist in the country. What good will a bunch of flowers be then? Or if my bank account is frozen and my worldly goods seized? There might even be an extant debtor's jail lurking in a far-flung corner where I will be thrown. I normally write a polite and gracious thank you letter to anyone who sends me a gift. But my moral dilemma: do I thank Scottish Power for the flowers, or return them, perhaps with an arbitrary handling bill, a large one? Joan Mathewson, Sunnyside, Glenmidge, Dumfries. Across the linguistic divide. Read the pronunciation of Mingus or Meneses. Letters February 28 and March 1, 2 and 4. It's nae wonder the English have difficulty. I met a lady some years ago at a conference down south who told me proudly she had mastered the pronunciation of her Scottish friend's name, phonetically Mingus. Out of curiosity, I asked where the friend lived, to be told north of Glasgow, place called Lingy. Scott McIntosh, 4 Alder Crescent, Killearn. After millennium in Galloway, why move Viking horde to Edinburgh? I note with interest the National Museums Scotland NMS spokesperson's view that it has been in discussions with Dumfries and Galloway Council over acquisition of the Galloway Viking Horde, or GVH, for several months now, and is continuing discussions. Galloway battles to keep £1 million Viking treasure, The Herald, March 2. My understanding of NMS's proposal is that it wants the rights to hope to buy the hoard and will deign to lend it to the regional museum service as and when they do not require it in Chambers Street. Despite being asked to do so on a number of occasions, they have not clarified how they propose to fund this, nor when the arrangements might apply. It will be no surprise to those of your readers with any knowledge of the process that, in seeking grant funding for such acquisitions, the National Museum and our own service would essentially be dipping their bread in the same gravy, so that, despite what may seem to be a David and Goliath situation, our resources available for acquisition and future conservation and research may be broadly similar. We have made provision in our new gallery in Kirkcudbright, currently under development, for a 2018 opening for secure and environmentally tailored display of the hoard. As Cathy Agnew of the Galloway Viking Hoard campaign points out in your article, this collection has remained under the soil of Galloway for a millennium, and it would be totally inappropriate for it now to be held in Edinburgh, with occasional drip feeding to the area where it was found. Museums and Galleries Scotland has a commitment in its Going Further strategy to brokering collaborations across the sector. National Museums Scotland's commitment to doing so in this case seems little more than lip service. There is no dispute of the scale of the National Museum. However, this should not mean that the interests of smaller regional services are overridden. There are exemplars of best practice in other parts of the UK, which demonstrate a willingness on the part of the British Museum to collaborate with regional museum services. And it is ironic that this positive approach is not reflected in our own National Museum's approach. The suggestion that the only way to secure the hoard for viewing by people outside of our beautiful and welcoming region is for them to make a beeline for Chambers Street, I find quite demeaning. There is cross-party support amongst our local MPs and MSPs for an agreement which gives our region a meaningful element of control over the future display and research of the hoard, as well as the recently launched GHV Campaigns petition, now with more than 1,000 signatures. Hundreds of people have taken the trouble to write personally to the Council to support our aspiration. There is a real feeling abroad in Dumfries and Galloway that our regional wish to continue to provide a home for this amazing collection should not be seen as separate from the national interest, rather as an expression of the desire of remote and rural communities across Scotland to have their historic and cultural identities recognised. Councillor Tom McCochtry, Chairman, Dumfries and Galloway Council's Communities Committee, English Street, Dumfries.
This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. News. Revealed. Hidden scandal of chronic pain wait times. Article by Dorothy Grace Elder. Thousands of chronic pain patients are suffering in a hidden national scandal that may be Scotland's worst waiting times failure. While new chronic pain patients are given priority in a bid to meet the Scottish Government's timeline of 18 weeks from referral to first treatment, return patients needing regular treatment are not being counted. Some have waited a year or more for treatment required every 4 to 6 months. Return patients say they are forced to suffer agony for longer as only first-time patients' wait is shown in statistics and they are given priority. A Herald investigation reveals thousands of the prioritised new patients are also not treated on time, leading to claims that pain services are in overall crisis through understaffing. Only 1,610 new patients out of 10,114 new referrals in 3 months, just 15.9%, started treatment on time in the most recent figures from July the 1st to September the 30th, 2016. Ian Semmons, chairman of the charity Action on Pain, said, "This is a national scandal, given these appalling circumstances. It is time for the Scottish Government to face up to the reality that the services for chronic pain patients in Scotland are in crisis for both new and return patients due to short staffing and ineffective monitoring." He blamed managers, health boards and the Scottish Government, adding, "Countless patients are being needlessly neglected by a system that is clearly not fit for purpose. Both new and return patients suffer from painful conditions, including severe arthritis, cancer, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, ME, and spinal damage through accidents." The figures compiled by the Information Services Division's ISD, which handles Scotland's health statistics, require detailed analysis to show the full impact on patients, as it is not clear from the original presentation. Between July and September last year, the data shows that there were 5,235 new referrals. Of these patients, 2,667 were seen by a clinician, but only 1,610 of them actually started treatment within the 18-week target time, a compliance rate of about 30%. However, the true scale of the delays is worse still, as an additional 4,879 patients left over from the previous quarter, still unseen and untreated, are not included in the statistics. Added to the 5,235, this gives a total of 10,114 new patients. ISD Scotland conceded that once these extra patients were accounted for, the true rate of patients receiving pain therapy on time halves to only 15.9%. Professor Jim McEwen, who compiled the landmark report in 2004 urging more staffing for chronic pain clinics, said, 13 years after my report, I am very sad to see from ISD statistics that there are still severe problems. This is related to inadequate resources and staffing. He criticised there being no mention of return patients as this clinical area is a key way of measuring outcomes, successful or otherwise. Chris Bridgeford, a pain sufferer who founded the Moray-based patient campaigning group AFASER, said, we have people despairing of their lives due to huge delays in treatment, while money is spent on useless and self-serving improvement groups and tick-box-loving talking shops sponsored by government. Pain clinics are being starved of the necessary funding which would make the lives of thousands of chronic pain patients eminently more bearable. Delays of 22 months for return patients have been found in Lanarkshire. Around 800,000 people in Scotland are suffering from a long-term painful condition. The Scottish Government is spending £700,000 annually on the country's first residential service for pain patients, nationally available and based in Glasgow for about 100 patients a year. Until recently, selected patients were sent as far as Bath, but Mr. Semmons said it was a fraction of what is required. Mr. Semmons said, it's the day clinics aiding tens of thousands that are underfunded. Over recent years, the Scottish Government response has been to set up a series of steering groups that have proved to be expensive and totally ineffective. We despair at the sheer incompetence. The Scottish Government is now in the process of setting up its fourth steering group on pain. 3 previous groups were disbanded after failing to tackle clinical shortages, despite taxpayers financing them and the government giving an extra £1.3 million for 14 local improvement discussion groups. Labour Health spokesman Anas Sarwar said, these figures are disgraceful, but further hidden waiting lists for return patients sum up how bad the problem has become. The SNP would rather keep Scotland in the dark than admit our NHS is struggling to cope. Mike Briggs, Conservative public health spokesman, said the situation was deeply embarrassing for the Scottish Government. He added, ministers need to get a grip urgently and intervene. A spokesman for the Scottish Government said, we are working to improve the quality of care for chronic pain sufferers in Scotland, and we expect patients to be seen within the most appropriate timescale for their condition. Asked why the fate of return patients, many thousands more, was not accounted for, the spokesman said, we do not collect chronic pain waiting times for return appointments, as each patient may require a different timescale to follow up appointments, based on clinical assessment. The spokesman added that the waiting times data is currently developmental. He said, we are working with NHS information services and NHS boards to address data accuracy and completeness issues. This article by Dorothy Grace Elder. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. News. Culture of denial stalls bid to tackle sectarianism in football. Article by Jerry Braden. Football is still failing to tackle the sectarian issues plaguing the game, a new report published today will say. 5 years after ministers established an independent group to advise on the scourge of sectarianism, and 2 years since the publication of the panel's findings, the latest report will detail progress made since 2015. But while it is expected to point to a number of positives, the Herald understands it will also detail a sense of exasperation with football clubs and authorities in confronting a culture of sectarianism within the wider game. One source said it will reference an ongoing culture of denial, adding that this approach by many within football remained a major barrier in making progress. The 2015 report said that while the centuries-old problem of sectarianism in Scotland was far from confined to sport, there could be little meaningful exchange in attitudes unless the wider football community addresses it. Since the publication of the report, there have been many attempts to push the strict liability scheme where clubs would be held responsible for the behaviour of their fans. Pivotal figures in the Scottish game, most notably Celtic's chief executive Peter Lawwell, have openly opposed the system. Much of the efforts by clubs to address sectarianism is still publicly funded. One source said, "It's been difficult to get football to engage with the group when they have set their faces against the issue. 2 years on from the question being asked about what the alternatives to strict liability could be, there hasn't been any coming from within football." It is understood the report, published just days before the latest clash between Celtic and Rangers, will again state that sectarianism is not the biggest social problem in Scotland, but should be seen in the wider context of equalities and human rights issues. The group is being headed by Northern Ireland academic Dr. Duncan Munro, who has a background in community relations work, with Scots-based academics and members of civic society doing much of the localised groundwork. The 2015 report outlined the frustration within football in dealing with the problem, a social attitudes survey stating that most people associated football and its wider culture with the problem. The launch of the report is also expected to coincide with the government's later announcements on where it was funding anti-sectarian work. This article by Jerry Braden. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. News. French car giant PSA Group to buy Vauxhall in deal for General Motors' European operations. This article is unattributed. French car giant PSA Group is to buy the European operations of General Motors, including Vauxhall in the UK, for £1.9 billion. The announcement ends weeks of speculation about the deal and its impact on thousands of jobs at Vauxhall plant in Ellesmere Port and Luton. Unite called for assurances over the long-term future of the UK factories. PSA will become the second largest automotive company in Europe, with a 17% market share. We are proud to join forces with Opel Vauxhall and are deeply committed to continuing to develop this great company and accelerating its turnaround, said Carlos Tavares, chairman of the managing board of PSA. We respect all that Opel Vauxhall talented people have achieved, as well as the company's fine brands and strong heritage. We intend to manage PSA and Opel Vauxhall capitalising on their respective brand identities. Having already created together winning products for the European market, we know that Opel Vauxhall is the right partner. We see this as a natural extension of our relationship and are eager to take it to the next level. We are confident that the Opel Vauxhall turnaround will significantly accelerate with our support, while respecting the commitments made by GM to the Opel Vauxhall employees. Mary Barra, Chairman and Chief Executive of GM, said the deal created a new opportunity to enhance the long-term performance of the respective companies, adding, "For GM, this represents another major step in the ongoing work that is driving our improved performance and accelerating our momentum. We are reshaping our company and delivering consistent record results for our owners through disciplined capital allocation to our higher return investments in our core automotive business and in new technologies that are enabling us to lead the future of personal mobility. We believe this new chapter puts Opel and Vauxhall in an even stronger position for the long term, and we look forward to our participation in the future success and strong value creation potential of PSA through our economic interest and continued collaboration on current and exciting new projects." Len McCluskey, General Secretary of Unite, said thousands of Vauxhall workers at Ellesmere Port and Luton had endured a nerve-wracking few weeks. While initial discussions with the PSA Group have been relatively positive, our priority now is to ensure a long-term future for our plants and the tens of thousands of workers depending on them, he said. Luton South's Labour MP Gavin Shuker said, "Glad to see the uncertainty over PSA GM deal is now over. Our UK plants are among the most efficient of any in the new company. They deserve a bright future. Now government needs to play its part delivering a Brexit deal that keeps Vauxhall building in the UK. The announcement said the transaction will allow substantial economies of scale and synergies in purchasing, manufacturing and research and development. PSA, together with BNP Paribas, will also acquire all of GM Financial's European operations through a newly formed 50% to 50% joint venture. This article is unattributed. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. News. Standard Life and Aberdeen Asset Management agree £11 billion merger. This article is unattributed. Standard Life and Aberdeen Asset Management have agreed terms on an £11 billion merger that will create Britain's biggest asset manager. The deal would create one of the world's industry powerhouses, overseeing £660 billion worth of global assets. Under the terms of the potential merger, Aberdeen shareholders would own 33.3% and Standard Life shareholders would own 66.7% of the combined group. However, it is thought several hundred jobs are at risk in Scotland and in the city, as the duo pointed to cost savings that could add up to £200 million. Keith Skeoch, Chief Executive of Standard Life, said, "We strongly believe that we can build on the strength of the existing Standard Life business by combining with Aberdeen to create one of the largest active investment managers in the world and deliver significant value for all our stakeholders." Following completion of the merger, which values Aberdeen at £3.8 billion, Standard Life Chairman Sir Jerry Grimstone will become Chairman of the combined entity. Mr Skeoch and Aberdeen boss Martin Gilbert will become co-chief executives of the new firm. The companies said the deal was still subject to a number of conditions, including shareholder approvals, but recommend that investors vote the deal through. This article is unattributed.
The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. Sport. The Matthew Lindsay column, Matthew Lindsay on Monday. Prospective appointment of Pedro Caixinha, loaded with unnecessary risk for Rangers. Foreign managers at the Old Firm clubs, or if you spend your days posting "Rangers died" under anonymous pseudonyms on Twitter and object to that phrase, the two largest clubs in Glasgow have enjoyed wildly contrasting fortunes over the last 20 years or so. Who will Pedro Caixinha emulate if, as is widely expected, he is confirmed as the new manager of Rangers in the coming days? Will he savour success like Wim Jansen, the first overseas manager, and Dick Advocaat, initially at least, did during their stints at Celtic and Rangers respectively? Or will he end up like Joe Weinglass, Paul Le Guen, and even Ronnie Delia, and depart having failed to deliver the levels of on-field excellence expected, and be remembered with little more than bemusement? It could go either way. Little is known about the 46-year-old from Bahia in Portugal, other than the clubs he has worked at as assistant: Sporting Lisbon, Panathinaikos and Rapid Bucharest, and as a manager in his own right: União Lira, Nacional, Santos Laguna and Al Garrafa. His sudden emergence as a serious contender to take over from Mark Warburton has come right out of left field, and no mistake. The former goalkeeper could very well prove himself to be a tactical genius and motivational mastermind who inspires journeyman professionals to perform superhuman acts, unearths a few foreign gems in the transfer market, and helps Rangers to end Celtic's total dominance of Scottish football. Or he could alternatively be utterly overwhelmed by the demands to succeed at Ibrox, struggle to cope with the personal scrutiny from supporters and the media, fail to raise performance levels, be unable to challenge the club on the other half of the city, detest the rotten weather and Scarpa. His potential arrival has certainly piqued the interest of Rangers supporters. If he comes, it will no doubt result in a healthy uptake of season ticket books once again. Renewal forms will be getting posted out to followers of the Ibrox club imminently. Certainly, he is a far sexier replacement for Warburton than, say, Alex McLeish. However, it is unquestionably a huge risk for a club in such a parlous state. There will have to be extensive surgery to the Rangers playing squad in the close season. Individuals who have failed to deliver or even feature in the first team, and there are a fair few of them, will need to be moved on if possible and replaced with those who are capable of contributing. Dave King, the Rangers chairman and major shareholder, has assured fans the new man will have money to work with. His budget will be larger than that at any club in the Scottish top flight, bar Celtic. If he recruits well, his side should, at the very least, finish best of the rest. But will he sign sensibly, or will he saddle his new employers with more expensive bench warmers? For a club which continues to operate at a loss and relies on the continued benevolence of wealthy supporters like King, George Letham, Douglas Park and George Taylor, putting their faith in a relatively unknown entity is a gamble. It was little surprise when Walter Smith, working as a pundit for Sky Sports at the Rangers game on Saturday, stated that his preferred option would be Derek McIntosh, his former player. Surely the Aberdeen manager would, even though it would require hefty compensation to secure his services, be a far safer option. The Scot knows the market well and has a successful track record in it. If Pedro Caixinha does rock up in Govan in the coming days, he will be a bold and ambitious choice by Rangers. If he does well, they will be lauded for their foresight. If he bombs, it could be very costly. And another thing. Graham Murty confessed that he was unsure where his future as a coach lay after being promoted from the under-20 team to the senior side at Rangers following the sudden departure of Mark Warburton last month. Would he remain involved in the youth ranks, or would he seek to move into management at some stage? The 42-year-old's brief spell as caretaker manager at Ibrox has suggested the latter is worth pursuing, as he has done well in difficult circumstances. Yes, the win over Greenock Morton was unconvincing, the defeat to Dundee dire, and the loss to Inverness Caledonian Thistle painful. But the wins over St Johnstone in the Ladbrokes Premiership and Hamilton in the William Hill Scottish Cup last week were vital for his club. Murty has altered the team formation from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1 and changed tactics with noticeable results. What is more, he has quickly earned the respect of his players. His talents will be wasted if he returns to coaching kids. The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. Sport, Roundup. First of all, football. Brendan Rodgers last night insisted St Mirren are the best team his Celtic side have faced domestically, ahead of their fourth meeting of the season with Rangers at Parkhead on Sunday. A stunning second-half display by Rodgers' team booked their place in the William Hill Scottish Cup semi-final next month, where they will face their Glasgow rivals at Hampden, and kept alive their hopes of completing a treble. Goals from Mikael Lustig, Scott Sinclair, Moussa Dembele and Lee Griffiths secured what was ultimately a comfortable 4-1 victory at home and extended their unbeaten domestic run to 33 games. However, Jack Ross's team gave their hosts a massive scare by taking the lead in the 13th minute through Harry Davis and reaching half-time 1-0 ahead. The Paisley Club, 5 points adrift at the bottom of the Ladbrokes Championship, could easily have built on their lead early in the second half. Celtic striker Moussa Dembele inadvertently turned a free kick by St Mirren midfielder Stevie Mallon onto the underside of his own crossbar with a failed clearance. Rodgers, whose side will face Rangers this weekend, was greatly impressed with how well the visitors had performed and admitted he had rated them more highly than any top-flight club he had encountered. "I have to give credit to St Mirren," he said, "because I think they are the best team we have played domestically, including Premiership teams. Jack's done an excellent job in a short period of time. They are very well coached and brought in some signings in January. How they are at the bottom of the league, I do not know. They have a good idea of the game. They have got composure, mobility and speed in the team. I can see why they would have beaten Hibs. Jack has got them very well organised. We knew it would be a good game despite where they are in the league position. St Mirren would hold their own in the Premiership." Basketball. Remedy required for Rocks after Scorchers prove too hot to handle. If losing is a habit, then Glasgow Rocks will hope it is an affliction they can quickly break. Defeat to British Basketball League title rivals Newcastle on Friday was excusable. Another reverse to Surrey Scorchers last night, anything but. Sterling Davis's men are now 10 points behind leaders Leicester, but at least with a comfortable cushion in third. But a fourth quarter collapse cost them the chance to quickly regain momentum as their bogey side left the Emirates Arena with an 89-75 win. With Neil Watson and Anthony Eleche out, the Scots coped manfully in hitting 9 unanswered points to move 26-18 clear after the opening period. And with Kieran Achara racking up 13 points and as many rebounds, they looked poised to triumph short-handed. However, the Scorchers, paced by 27 points from ex-Rock Teo Ogedengbe, hit back with an 8-0 burst, and although Glasgow pulled clear again, the visitors produced the most timely of surges. Holding the Rocks to just 5 points in the opening 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, they closed with a 9-1 run that put the Rocks, headed by 21 from Hayden Lesko, on their heels. Leicester remain on track for the title after beating Cheshire 82-75, while Sheffield kept up their chase of the Scots by holding off Plymouth 87-81. Meanwhile, women's BBL strugglers, Caledonian Pride, were crushed 88-59 by Northumbria to stay one place off the foot of the table. Sarah Thompson scored 21, but the Scots were undone in the second period when a 13-2 flurry wrecked their chances. Squash. Georgia Adderley put in a superb performance to win the Sterling Trucks Scottish Senior National Championships yesterday. The 16-year-old from Edinburgh, who has also played age-grade football for her country, is seen as Scotland's best squash prospect, and it is easy to see why. At Edinburgh Sports Club she showed determination and skill to defeat 20-year-old Elspeth Young from Kinross 11-4, 5-11, 11-6, 12-10 to lift the trophy in front of an appreciative audience. After the match, a delighted Adderley said, "Coming into the event aged 16 as number 1 seed brought its own pressures, but I had played in this event last year for the first time, and that helped me with nerves and what to expect out there. I played well in my semi-final on Saturday, and that left me feeling good about the final. Elspeth is a few years younger than me and more experienced, so I knew it would be hard. We had some really good rallies in the first game, but she then came back in the second. At that point I had to hold my nerve, but I did, and got a good start to the third game. I then managed to go on and win, and the feeling at the end was amazing. In the men's event, Scottish number 1, Alan Klein, who has risen to world number 32, defeated Edinburgh's Douglas Kempsell to lift the 4th national title on the spin. It was Klein's 7th victory at this event overall, and he was on top from the off in the final, winning in 3 games, 11-5, 11-5, 11-2. The 30-year-old champion from Inverness said, "I knew that Douglas would put up a real fight in the final because we all know he is a battler. That was the way that it panned out, but I managed to get on the front foot and take the win. I am often playing abroad, so I love getting a chance to play in Scottish tournaments, and I am very proud to be national champion for a 7th time." The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. Sport, Shinty. Kevin Ferry goes along to see the start of the Shinty season. Spirited Show Boys GMA for season ahead. Hugh Dan McLennan, BBC Alpa's voice of Gaelic sport, was my principal guide, but frequently critical co-commentary was provided throughout by a former Glasgow Mid-Argyll player who had brought colour to proceedings in the middle of a yoker housing estate before he uttered a word. Very much a modern successor to the Highland dandies of Lower, resplendent as he was in flat cap, trendy duffel coat and tan brogues. Ollie Macaulay's analysis was extremely helpful, if laced with the odd unbroadcastable adjective, but best summed up by his second-half observation that the game should be played with grace and finesse, and just occasionally a mighty bluter. Even to the untrained eye, it was evident that the playing surface was better suited to the latter. It is a shameful admission that this visit to Peterson Park to watch Glasgow Mid-Argyll take on the mighty Kingussie on their return to the Marine Harvest Premiership as it got underway on Saturday was a first live experience of a sport that is as uniquely Scottish as whisky, as shortbread, as cranachan, as clooty dumpling, as iron brew, and just as ruinous to dentistry. Not just for players either, on this evidence, since it is all very well feeling you are getting up close and personal with the combatants, but with attempts to get a view of proceedings frequently inducing encroachment onto the pitch, the proximity and pace at which that little white bullet of a ball passed us at regular intervals added an extra dynamic to the thrill of spectating. That apart, it was excellent entertainment, the physiques of the respective players generally reaffirming the notion that the men from the Highland village are very much giants of this sport, while those from the big city are its minnows, and for the most part Kingussie's superior power dictated the shape of the game as it ended 1-3. Not that GMA were without their chances to apply a different sort of pressure, and Craig Dawson, in the visitors' goal, had to be sharp on a couple of occasions, particularly in the period just after the opening goal was registered by Rory Anderson, whose father David was part of the team which dominated the sport for 20 years from the mid-80s, while his grandfather Andy had been among those who were on the receiving end on GMA's greatest day in 1973 when they won the Camanachd Cup in Fort William. A second goal, late in the from Captain Ryan Bothwick, registered just before half-time, allowed the captain to withdraw from the fray soon thereafter in as much comfort as the troublesome back problem which forced his departure would permit, and the game was wrapped up just short of the hour mark when Eric Hollysong, his replacement, scored their third. After many years in which it was a given that all 12 players representing Kingussie would be past the Camanachd Cup winners, it is telling that this team contained just 3, according to the redoubtable Hugh Dan: Dawson, James Hutchison and Lee Bain. A change in fortunes has been such that they came close to suffering the indignity of relegation from the top flight for the first time ever, and they have turned to a man who has been a familiar face to far more than shinty fans to revive their fortunes. We all know if you're part of Kingussie's shinty club, there's a standard that comes with it as a player, and if we set these standards, we'll not be far off, Dallas Young, their newly appointed manager, observed afterwards. We know that people that have gone before us, we just have to keep on matching that, and we'll get ourselves back to where we want to be. It's only hard work that'll do that. He was first to admit that will be a case of do as I say rather than what he did, in terms of his approach at times in the course of his career, but he is well known not just because he featured alongside train-spotting star Robert Carlyle in the television programme Hamish Macbeth, but because of his flowing locks held back by a headband bearing the legend Wild Thing, the nickname that recognised both his recklessly brave playing style. He missed a string of Camanachd Cup wins as a result of suffering 3 broken legs and his off-field reputation. He is willing to acknowledge that he may not be the best man for the job in terms of coaching credentials, but with his son Roddy now in his former slot at full forward, he and former teammate Barry Dallas are ready to give all they have to help the club return to former glories. There are a couple of people who might be better placed to be in this job, but there are reasons they're not involved, he observed. However, myself and Barry are here, and we'll give 110% and back the players to the hilt, and hopefully, at the end of the year, we'll have done a job that will be acceptable to everyone in Kingussie. For GMA's part, there was consolation to be had in denying Kingussie a clean sheet when Callum Macleay lashed the ball unstoppably past Dawson, leading to a firmly polite inquiry to referee David Mitchell regarding just how much injury time he intended to play, but most particularly from their overall competitiveness. I can see a lot of work on there. They never gave up, and we could have had a goal in the first half when we had the pressure, said the home team's coach George Hay, who had admitted beforehand that finishing 8th, 1 spot above relegation, is the season's main objective. I'm quite optimistic. They'll learn, and they need to up the tempo. But when we last played these guys here, they beat us 14-0, so the gap's narrowing for us, and we really need to up our game now, said Hay. The Herald, Monday, March the 6th. Sport, Rugby Union. Emphatic victory gives Warriors fresh hope of making playoffs. Glasgow Warriors 47, Newport Gwent Dragons 17. It has been a strange season so far for Glasgow, one in which the usual order of things has been stood on its head. After 6 years of reaching the Pro 12 playoffs, they remain in grave danger of missing out, while after a far longer period of underachievement in Europe, they have enjoyed their best ever pool performance and are through to the Champions Cup quarter-finals as a result. The unavailability of key players during the international window has something to do with that stark contrast between competitions, of course. of the 15 men who began the magnificent 43-0 demolition of Leicester back in January, for example, only 4 started on Saturday against the Dragons. Yet those problems have been there for a while. The Warriors are not the only team to be confronted by them, and in previous seasons they have found a way round them. The vagaries of the fixture list have played a part, but after this convincing victory, Gregor Townsend accepted that some results have simply been a case of players not playing well enough. When we saw the fixture list, we knew it would be tough, the head coach said. We knew it would be really hard and would really test our resources. But I don't think we played as well as we could have, as well as what this group is capable of. At the front of your mind, there's disappointment. In the back of your mind, there's encouragement. We were missing so many players, but we were still disappointed not to come away from Ospreys with a win, or from Ulster with a better performance. After losing those 2 games, and also going down to the Scarlets last month, the Warriors needed to get back on course against the Dragons, and they did so after a curious first quarter in which little went right for them. The Welsh side took the lead with a penalty, and added a converted try before Glasgow got their act together, but when they did, there was no stopping them. 2 converted tries from the outstanding Nick Grigg put the home team in front at the break, and Rory Hughes and Ratu Taibagib made sure of the bonus point in the early stages of the second half. Lee Jones, Mark Bennett and Peter Horn were all on the score sheet too, and the standoff had an excellent day with the boot, converting all of his team's tries bar the Jones score. A late Dragons try was no more than a minor annoyance. There was a period of 45 or 50 minutes when we scored 47 points without reply, second row Tim Swinson said. The team we had out was a mixture of guys coming back from Scotland, guys who have been here for a short time, and guys who have been here for a longer time and not played for a few weeks. So it was good that we got a little bit of teething problems out of the way, that when we found our rhythm in the middle period, we were pretty good, pretty effective at playing at pace, which was fantastic to see. The Warriors should have most, if not all, of their internationals back for the next league match against Connacht, although the luckless Richie Vernon may be out for some time, having been taken off with what was thought to be Achilles damage just before half-time. But even if they win all of their remaining games with bonus points, their final tally will be 71 points. That total should easily be bettered by the current top 3, Leinster, Ospreys and Munster, leaving the Warriors needing to overtake both Ulster and Scarlets. We'll see how the other teams do, Townsend added. Scarlets have had a fantastic Six Nations period, and they had a great win away to Munster. We all realise that it's going to have to be wins from here in. If we can do that, then that might put us in with a chance. Ulster have a game in hand, and their next 3 matches against Zebra, Dragons and Cardiff are all potential 5-pointers. But they have a tough run-in away to Munster and Ospreys, then home to Leinster, so could yet falter. The Scarlets are at home to Edinburgh and Treviso, away to the Dragons and Connacht, then finally at home to the Ospreys. They only have 5 bonus points to date, the fewest in the top half of the table, and that could prove a crucial blow to their top 4 hopes. The Warriors squad, of course, will not concern themselves with the arithmetical permutations. We're rugby players. Maths isn't our strong suit, usually, Swinson said. The point is we've just got to go through and win. Results like this, where we've got 5 points, are fantastic. If we do that until the end of the season, then we're putting ourselves into the best state to get into the playoffs. So that's what we've got to aim for. Glasgow's remaining league games are Connacht at home, Munster away, Zebra at home, Leinster away, Edinburgh at home.
This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Politics. Sturgeon urged to drop economic advisor Jim McCall over attendance at exclusive Tory dinner. This article by Paul Hutchin. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been urged to drop one of her top economic advisers after he attended a £25,000 a head fundraising dinner for the Tories. Jim McCall, a billionaire tycoon who backed independence in 2014, was part of an elite group of businessmen who had access to Prime Minister Theresa May at the private event last week. Patrick Harvey, MSP, the Scottish Greens co-convener, said the Scottish Government should reconsider his role on their Council of Economic Advisers. McCall said he did not pay to attend the dinner, and added that he had been invited by a Tory donor he knows. The Prime Minister was in Glasgow on Friday, where she delivered a speech to the Scottish Tory Party conference. However, the Sunday Herald can reveal that May was the star turn at a highly exclusive dinner held by a Tory fundraising group on Thursday evening. The discreet supper was held at the home of Sir Jack Harvey, a businessman who has raised millions of pounds for the Tories through his Focus on Scotland FOS organisation. His FOS dinners have been either large black tie events or much smaller gatherings at his house in Mugdock near Mulgai. Cash raised by FOS goes to the Tories. It is understood between 10 and 15 business people were at the house dinner at a cost of up to £25,000 a head, as was Scottish Tory leader Ruth Davidson. The big-name tycoon was McCall, a Monaco resident who heads up a number of successful companies that operate around the globe. Ahead of the 2014 referendum, the Clyde Blowers chair was one of around 200 company bosses who signed a pro-independence letter. We are involved in business and entrepreneurship at different levels in Scotland and around the world. We believe independence is in the best interest of Scotland's economy and its people. However, public statements suggest he has gone cooler on independence since the referendum. He is also a member of the First Minister's prestigious Council of Economic Advisers. Contacted by this newspaper yesterday, McCall said, "I was invited along by a Tory donor and I was intrigued to meet Theresa May and just listen to what she had to say. So I went along and it was a very interesting evening." He said he did not pay to attend the dinner. "I didn't. I was invited by a donor," he added. "I was a +1. McCall also said he was sad to hear Harvey's reaction, adding, "I and other business leaders are always open to meet any politician, irrespective of party, and will continue to do so to help influence and achieve the best outcomes for our economy." A senior Scottish Tory said, "We are stepping up our engagement with Scotland's leading business figures as we seek to offer an alternative vision to this incompetent SNP government." In her conference speech yesterday, Davidson name-checked McCall and the college she has been backing. "We want more innovation and freedom in our education system, so entrepreneurs like Jim McCall are encouraged, not put off, from building more brilliant junior colleges for kids who would otherwise leave school with nothing. The Newlands College on Glasgow's south side is a vocational school for young people who are not academic. In January, Davidson praised the same initiative in a press release that applauded McCall. John McGlynn, a successful entrepreneur and lifelong Tory who founded the Airlink Group, was also at the dinner. He also backed Yes in 2014. An FOS spokesperson said, "The dinner you refer to was a Focus on Scotland FOS business group dinner. Business people attend FOS events regardless of their political allegiances. FOS is not interested and will never inquire about anyone's politics. Politicians and business people welcome the opportunity to have useful dialogue. FOS has always publicly declared its donations to the Conservative Party according to law, but business people still choose to attend its events regardless of their own preferred political choices." A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "Members of the Council of Economic Advisers are selected for their skills and experience." This article by Paul Hutchin. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Politics. Chancellor Philip Hammond signals cautious approach to spending and budget. This article is unattributed. Chancellor Philip Hammond has signalled he will take a cautious approach to spending in Wednesday's budget. Mr Hammond accused people calling for him to use increased tax receipts for a major injection of cash into the economy and services as reckless. He told BBC's Andrew Marr show, "It's not money in the wallet because we are borrowing a huge amount of money. Remember, we have over £1.7 trillion worth of debt. This isn't money in a pot. What is being speculated on is whether we might not have borrowed quite as much as we were forecast to borrow. If your bank increases your credit card limit, I don't think you feel obliged to go out and spend every last penny of it immediately." Mr Hammond said he saw his role as ensuring that we have got reserves in the tank, so as we embark on the journey that we will be taking over the next couple of years, we are confident that we have got enough gas in the tank to see us through that journey. Amid reports that the Chancellor was set to provide more than £1 billion for social care in the budget, Mr Hammond said, "I recognise in particular that social care and local authorities delivering social care are under some pressure. This isn't just about money. We should remember there are many authorities managing extremely well." The Chancellor rejected calls from Labour's John McDonnell for him to publish his tax returns. "No, I have no intentions of doing so. Just for the record, my tax affairs are all perfectly regular and up to date. But I think this demonstration politics isn't helping the atmosphere in British politics." This article is unattributed. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Brexit. Chancellor Philip Hammond warns EU that Britain will fight back over deal. This article is unaccredited. Chancellor Philip Hammond has warned the EU that Britain will fight back and not slink off like a wounded animal if it does not get the Brexit deal it wants. In some of the toughest talking yet ahead of the UK triggering the Article 50 negotiations on terms of withdrawal, the Chancellor said Britain would do whatever we needed to do to be competitive in the event of leaving the EU without a trade agreement. Mr Hammond told BBC's Andrew Marr show, "If there is anybody in the European Union who thinks that if we don't do a deal with the European Union, if we don't continue to work closely together, Britain will simply slink off as a wounded animal, that is not going to happen. British people have a great fighting spirit and we will fight back. We will forge new trade deals around the world. We will build our business globally. We will go on from strength to strength and we will do whatever we need to do to make the British economy competitive and to make sure that this country has a great and successful future." Asked if this meant the UK would slash business taxes to attract investment away from the EU, the Chancellor said, "People can read what they like into it. I am not going to speculate now on how the UK would respond to what I don't expect to be the outcome. But we are going into a negotiation. We expect to be able to achieve a comprehensive free trade deal with our European partners. We expect to be able to achieve a comprehensive free trade deal with our European Union partners. But they should know that the alternative isn't Britain just slinking away into a corner." The Chancellor indicated that the UK would pay any Brexit bills it owed to the EU. He said, "Obviously this is a piece of negotiating strategy that we are seeing in Brussels. We are a nation that honours its obligations, and if we do have any bills that fall to be paid, we will obviously deal with them in the proper way. We are a nation which abides by its international obligations. We always have done, we always will do, and everybody can be confident about that." The comments came after a Lord's report stated that Britain could legally walk away from the EU without paying a penny if there is no trade deal. Well, it has been reported that the European Commission's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, is seeking a €60 billion, £52 billion exit bill from Britain. The Lord's EU Financial Affairs Subcommittee said all estimates of the cost of withdrawal were hugely speculative. This article is unattributed. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Dugdale loyalists lost out in Labour internal elections over bungled campaign approach. This article by Paul Hutchin. Supporters of Kezia Dugdale failed to win a majority of the places on Scottish Labour's governing body after fielding too many candidates, the Sunday Herald can reveal. A slate of candidates loyal to the UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn secured most of the constituency slots on the party's executive, even though they won fewer votes in some regions. Dugdale easily won the Scottish Labour leadership in 2015, but is under pressure from an emboldened left wing. Mobilised by the Campaign for Socialism, the left wants Dugdale to pursue a socialist agenda and work closer with Corbyn's team. An influx of new members, Scottish Labour currently has around 26,000, also means that any future leadership contest could be closer than in previous races. One of Dugdale's immediate challenges is dealing with a newly elected executive, which is made up of politicians, senior trade unionists and constituency party representatives. She commanded a clear majority on the body, but elections in January have made the arithmetic tighter. 5 of the 8 constituency places were won by candidates who ran on pro-Corbyn slate. However, the full breakdown of the results revealed that the so-called moderate wing of the party would almost certainly have won most of the seats if a coordinated approach had been taken. In the central Scotland Glasgow super region, 2 Corbynistas collectively polled 1,432 votes against 1,697 votes won by 3 moderates. However, the presence of the 3 on the ballot split the vote and ensured that none of them won. Instead, Stephen Lowe and Angela Feeney got both executive places. In North East Scotland and Highlands and Islands, 3 moderates polled 1,440 votes, while the solitary left-winger on the vote, Leslie Brennan, won 569 votes. Again, due to her opposition vote being split 3-way, Brennan secured one of the region's 2 places on the executive. A senior party source said, "The results show that the Corbynista machine in Scotland was smarter than the network around Kes. The moderates should have won a majority." A second source said the failure was more about discipline than organisation. However, the same party insider said the results proved that there are still more moderate voters in Scottish Labour than Corbynistas. Another comfort for Dugdale is that some of the trade union representatives on the executive are favourable to her leadership and sceptical of Corbyn. The key executive meeting will be one scheduled to take place after May's local government election, at which Scottish Labour is bracing itself for heavy losses. Opinion polls have Dugdale's party on around 15% of the vote, down from the historic low of 19.1% achieved at the last Holyrood election. A spokesman said, "We congratulate all successful candidates and thank those who are standing down. Members of the SEC are united in their determination to take our party forward. Only Scottish Labour is standing up to SNP and Tory austerity." This article by Paul Hutchin. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Arts. Arts News. March into Pitlochry. New lunchtime concert series in Glasgow. Tina May's tribute to Ella. Tony Bennett at 90. This article by Keith Bruce. The second March into Pitlochry Festival of Americana and Indie Music takes place in the Perthshire town on Friday and Saturday, March the 24th and 25th. Musicians from England and Wales will be appearing alongside Scottish talents including Hunter and the Bear, Purple Felts, the Carloways and local teenage singer-songwriter Danny Smiley. Welsh combo Johnny Cage and the Voodoo Groove headline the Friday programme, and singer-songwriter Peter Bruntwell, whose Nost a Comrade was a recent Mojo magazine Americana album of the month, is among the Saturday attractions. The music takes place in various venues and is sponsored by local businesses TLC Laundry, MKM Building Supplies, Edmondson Electrical, AJB Developments, Morrison Young and RW Bell Pitlochry. marchintopitlochry.co.uk. A new series of monthly lunchtime concerts is launching in Glasgow at the Royal Faculty of Procurators in Nelson Mandela Place. Tuesday Tunes will present leading musicians on the Scottish classical and chamber music scene in an hour-long programme and will begin on March the 24th with guitar duo Alan Neve and Matthew McAllister in a meeting of master and pupil. McAllister studied with Neve at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama as was before going on to appear in concert venues across the world, including the Concertbouw in Amsterdam, the Purcell Room, London, Teatro Britannico, Lima, and Caesars Palace, Las Vegas. Violin and accordion duo Andrea and Georgi Gajic follow on April the 18th, and wind quintet Sirocco Winds appear on May the 23rd. The concerts begin at 1 p.m. www.classicalmusicianscotland.com. Glasgow promoters PM Music have added a tribute to jazz singer Ella Fitzgerald to their busy schedule of concerts throughout March, April and May. To mark Fitzgerald's centenary year, leading UK jazz singer Tina May and pianist Brian Kellogg are touring their Ella and Oscar presentation, which revisits the recording Ella Fitzgerald made with Oscar Peterson in 1975. They bring it to Webster's Theatre in Great Western Road on Thursday, May the 11th, as part of PM Music's spring season, which also includes two-tone legends The Selector, American blues singer Sarah Score, Fife-born troubadour Rab Noakes, and Welsh folk band Callan. pmmusic.co.uk. As the busy itinerary on his website illustrates, singer Tony Bennett has shown no inclination to slow down after his 90th birthday. A regular visitor to Glasgow Royal Concert Hall, both during and outside the city's jazz festival, he returns to the venue on July the 1st for the sole Scottish date on his celebratory tour, following 2 nights at London's Royal Albert Hall. TonyBennett.com. This article by Keith Bruce. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Arts. Music review. Ollie Murs at the SSE Hydro, Glasgow. This article by Jonathan Geddes. Music. Ollie Murs, SSE Hydro, Glasgow. Jonathan Geddes, 2 stars. Ollie Murs has proved remarkably durable. 8 years have passed since he appeared on the X Factor, yet here he is with another chart-topping album in last year's 24 Hours and 2 nights at the Hydro. Perhaps the reason why is that he knows his audience. From the ease with which he larked about with items of underwear thrown on stage, to pantomime reactions provoked by any mention of his ex-girlfriend or newly single status, Glasgow approved strongly of the latter. At times he appeared to be on a mission to make sure every cheeky chappy stereotype was adhered to, with the enthusiasm of a wide-eyed puppy on a sugar rush behind each sugar pose wiggle of his bum or mild double entendre. That affable and straightforward nature creates an entertainer who is never likely to cause his fan base to veer away, but it doesn't lead to particularly exciting music. The moments when he did show a more serious side stood out most, with the effective ballad of Flaws and the saxophone solo-powered I Need You Now providing substance underneath the good time pop gloss. Tellingly, the set tended to run through various genres without ever finding a sound of Murs' own. There was a folksy tone to Up, mellow pop on Grow Up, and a swinging Dance With Me Tonight, but it all felt like trying on various guises rather than any real expression, a fact spotlighted by some of the evening's highlights being a detour into What's Love Got to Do With It and a pop medley. Murs was a likeable showman, but only with the slick dance floor banger of Troublemaker did he have a pop gem to call his own. This article by Jonathan Geddes. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Business. Glasgow law firm hails its latest sports contract. This article by Scott Wright. Harper McLeod has strengthened its association with the world of sport after being named legal advisor to the Glasgow 2018 European Championships. The law firm, which sponsors rugby team the Glasgow Warriors and supports Scottish wheelchair racer Sammy Kinghorn, will provide legal services to support the event, touching on commercial contracts, intellectual property, governance and regulatory matters. It builds on similar work the firm carried out as legal advisor to the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games, with Harper McLeod having won its latest contract following a public procurement exercise. Hosted jointly by Glasgow and Berlin, the European Championships brings a series of major existing events spanning athletics, aquatics, cycling, gymnastics and triathlon under a single banner. The event, which organisers say can potentially attract a television audience of more than 1 billion, We'll see Glasgow host swimming at Toll Cross and gymnastics at the Emirates Arena. Berlin will host athletics. Martin Darragh, Chief Executive of Harper McLeod, said, "We know just what it takes to make a multi-sport event such as this happen, and happen successfully as Glasgow proved 3 years ago. Glasgow 2018 will give us an opportunity to once again use the unique set of legal skills required to deliver the championships that everyone can enjoy and be proud of. We are lawyers who love sport, it's in the firm's DNA, so we were determined to win this role once we knew the country had landed the first ever European Championships, just as we did with the Commonwealth Games almost 6 years ago." Aileen Campbell, MSP, Scottish Government Minister for Sport, said, "We are absolutely determined to host the championships that will be a spectacle to the world and further enhance Scotland's international reputation for hosting world-class events." This article by Scott Wright. This article from the Herald on Monday the 6th of March 2017. Business. The trend to spring calving brings benefits to cows and farmers. This article by Rog Wood. Scottish farmers are increasingly calving their beef cows at this time of year, partly because spring calving cows don't have calves suckling them during the winter months and are, as a result, cheaper to feed. Autumn calving cows, on the other hand, have to produce milk for the calves they are still nursing during the winter and need a more nutritious and expensive diet. Another advantage of calving in late February and March is that the calves have grown big enough by May to benefit from the flush of milk their mothers produce when they are turned out to the nutritious spring grass. The end result of such a strategy is that suckled calves born at this time of year are all well grown and at weaning in October and are much cheaper to produce than autumn-born calves. Just because spring calving beef cows can be fed a cheaper forage-based diet doesn't mean that you can get away with not feeding them properly. They don't need to be too fat nor too thin. Fat cows often have difficulty giving birth as they don't push the calves out as quickly as trimmer ones, and may also have bigger calves that need to be assisted at birth. Lean ones tend to have smaller calves but may not give enough milk, or more importantly not have enough good quality colostrum to get their newborn calf off to a good start in life. Colostrum is a thick milk produced for a couple of days after calving that acts as a laxative for the calf and passes on immunity to a host of diseases that its mother has encountered during her life, but it must be suckled within a few hours of birth to be effective. Colostrum quality relies on a healthy mother with an active immune system and an adequate protein quality in her diet. Some boost the rations of their cows with a mineral supplement containing additional magnesium about 2 to 3 weeks before they are due to calf. The extra magnesium helps mobilize the cow's own body reserves of calcium, improving muscle tone in the womb and helping to prevent prolonged calving. Predicting difficulties at calving is not a precise science and is often linked to both the physiology of the cow and its calf. For instance, a small cow with a large pelvis will often have an easier time at calving than a large cow with a relatively small pelvis. Then again, a modest-sized calf with thick shoulders or a beefy double-muscled backside may not slip out as easily as a large, narrow calf. There may also be difficulties caused by the calf coming backwards or in a breech presentation where its bottom comes first with its hind legs tucked under its body, or with one or both of its front legs pointing backwards in the birth canal, to name but a few of the problems that can occur. The main sheds where I kept my beef cows all lay within a couple of 100 feet of the farmhouse. As beef cows have a tendency to calf during the night, I used to sleep with my bedroom window open at calving time so that I could hear the distinctive morning sounds of a cow going into labour. Then it was a case of getting up regularly through the night to keep an eye on things. I can tell you that there is no more gut-wrenching sight than a big pair of hooves protruding from the back end of a cow, indicating a big calf that needs assistance to be born. When examining a cow, the first thing is to establish how the calf is being presented in the birth canal and if it is still alive. When you reach in with your hand, a live calf often jerks its foot when you handle its legs or pinch the skin between its toes. You can also stick a finger into its mouth to see if it sucks or gags. More importantly, if there is no muscle tone and the anal sphincter is completely flaccid, then the calf is dead. Acting as a midwife to a big beef cow is heavy work. not as hygienic as an NHS maternity ward, and invariably the farmer needs to take a shower afterwards. This can be a stressful and sleepless time for beef farmers. This article by Rog Wood.
Well, that's all from today's edition of the Herald Scotland, brought to you from the volunteers of Q and Review Print Speaking to the Blind. Check out their website at www.qandreview.com.